following longtime California Senator Dianne Feinstein's announcement she will not seek re-election, the race to replace her is shaping up to be an intense fight. Among the Democratic primary contenders, Congressman Adam Schiff right now leads the fundraising race, with his campaign announcing last week it raised $6.5 million in the first 3 months of the year. Now, that's compared to $4.5 million raised by Congresswoman Katie Porter and $1.4 million raised by Congresswoman Barbara Lee. And Congresswoman Porter joins us now. She's out today with a new book entitled I Swear, Politics is Messier Than My Minivan. So how messy is your minivan?
Pretty messy. I just recently vacuumed it up, and I was relieved that I didn't break the vacuum at the car wash with some of the things that got sucked up. A lot of sand from the beach, old mass, like quite a bit of junk was in there.
What kind of sounds like my minivan.
What are you learning out on the campaign trail when you talk to voters?
A lot of concern about the cost of housing. I think this is a huge issue for not only Californians, but actually around the country. I think it's one of the issues that Democrats, as a policy matter, have not engaged deeply enough in. I did an event recently at the University of California, Davis, and I asked the 70 or so undergraduates and graduate students there how many of them thought they'd be able to buy a house in their lifetime. And not a single hand went up. So I think the federal government needs to lean more into housing policy. I think the Biden administration has actually done some interesting things here that haven't gotten talked about a lot. But I think as California's next senator, working on bringing down the cost of housing so families have more resources to put into their savings, their retirement, college costs, health care, it's really a top priority of mine.
Congressman Porter, we've been talking a lot this morning about gun violence, obviously, given the shooting in Kentucky. Why do you think, I mean, California has strong gun laws, stronger than a lot of states, but the assault weapons ban is sort of in the judge's hands right now. Why do you think there hasn't been more action at the federal level? Is it the NRA? Is it the gun lobby? Are there other reasons? What's holding it back?
Well, I think, frankly, Republicans are not held accountable by Americans for supporting gun policies that end up causing deaths. So at the end of the day, the hardest part about democracy is that it's actually about us as voters, not just us as elected officials. So I think the solution is if your elected official, wherever you live in this country, isn't supporting gun policies that will reduce preventable gun violence, vote them out. And I think gerrymandering and some of the lack of competitive districts, more districts that are deeply Republican, means that there are fewer and fewer of those competitive races where the will of the people really shapes who goes to Congress. I come from one of those competitive districts, and so I think I think a lot about what do my constituents want me to get done. Not every member of Congress does.
What do you think? Is there a way Democrats are talking about it that's not working? I mean, is there, since you are in a competitive district, you represent a competitive district, is it language? Is it not being forceful enough? What should people be doing in this moment?
Well, definitely, I think one of the things that we need to communicate more clearly, and I just heard Mika say this, is that policies will work. And so I think there's been a long history of saying, well, this might not work, this might not work, that might not work. That's the role of the research and of the federal government and the CDC treating gun violence as a public health problem, which it is. It's the leading cause of death of children. And so I think we need to lean more into these are not symbolic legislation. This is not just waving a flag at something. This will actually save lives. And one of the best ways we can do that is think about how to reduce preventable gun deaths by suicide, which, of course, remains the largest cause of gun violence deaths.
The other issue that is on the minds of a lot of women and people in this country is, of course, abortion, the decision by the judge on mifepristone. Some of your colleagues have proposed a piece of legislation that would help take some steps forward, help make it more available. Do you support that? Are there other steps at a federal level that Congress can actually do to help women out there?
Yep. Congressman Ryan and Congresswoman Fletcher have done a great job getting that legislation going quickly. I don't know when I've seen so many people rush on our listserv to announce that they wanted to sign on to something. And it's because we understand that regardless of one's personal decision about when and if to start a family, it's exactly that, a personal decision. So I do think this legislation is important. I'm sure the Biden administration will appeal the decision. I fear this is headed straight for the Supreme Court and could deepen, if the court goes in the direction of invalidating the FDA, could deepen distrust in the Supreme Court at a time when obviously, I think reasonably and understandably, trust in the court is already low.
Congresswoman, money in politics obviously is an issue that a lot of people care deeply about, trying to get money out of politics. But you're running for senator in what has to be the most expensive state in the nation to run for. How much do you think a winning candidate's going to need to raise to become the next senator from the state of California?
Well, I'm a very strong fundraiser. Luckily for me, I love getting out there and talking to people and doing it. I love writing and thinking about how to communicate with my supporters via email. Our top fundraising email after my Senate launch was one in which I offered people recipes that I used to make at 5:30 in the morning before I head to D.C. And people were just apparently have the same problems I do, which is what the heck are they going to make for dinner? So I'm sure it will take a lot of resources for this race, but I've had competitive races. I raised, $26 million in my House race cycle. It was the second highest fundraiser behind only Kevin McCarthy last cycle. So this will take a lot of resources because there are a lot of Californians who need to be communicated with, who need to be listened to, and who I'm looking forward to fighting for in the Senate.
The new book is entitled, I Swear, Politics is Messier Than My Minivan, and apparently that's saying a lot. Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter of California, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.